destiny or free will? I came to the conclusion that it is important to address this question after a discussion with some people who were outrightly against goal setting periodically at the end of the year, or at the end of each quarter, or even monthly, or even weekly. I am someone who believes in goal setting, and I also believe in destiny. So I was shocked that some people believed in destiny in such a way that they felt that destiny is absolute, which meant that everything that happens to us is beyond our control. Hence this discussion today. What is destiny? Let's start with defining destiny. Destiny is that unknown factor, or perhaps known, but it is an invisible factor that determines with certainty every event in our life. That is the definition of destiny. Now, is this true? Is every event predetermined by a certain invisible factor? I am a person of faith, but I disagree with this notion that every event in our life, every outcome is predetermined in entirety with certainty by this invisible factor. So now that we have defined destiny as the invisible factor that determines with certainty every event in our life, let's look at what are other synonyms that people use for destiny. Other synonyms used for destiny are words like fate, God's plan, or God's will. So the word God comes in here. I am a person of faith, and I believe in the existence of God, and I am liberal at using the word God in my discussions about life, right? However, I consider myself a spiritual person as opposed to someone who is a particular religion centric. I'm not centered around a particular religion, and in fact I'm not centered around any religion. Therefore I am not religious, I am spiritual. I have an eclectic view of a religion, meaning I take what's good from every religion, right? So that is a separate matter altogether. So far what we have discussed is that I think destiny or fate or God's will or God's plan doesn't control in absolute terms every event that happens in our life with certainty. I believe in free will. I believe that while there is God's will, God does exist, there is supreme power or source that governs every aspect of life, but by virtue of our design, we are created as people with free will and people who have a large degree of control over our own lives, its events and outcome. So rather than asking destiny or free will, I think the better question to ask is how much destiny and how much free will? Because when we talk about the degree or the extent to which the outcomes in our lives is controlled, or the outcomes in our lives are controlled by destiny and our free will, I think the scale is tipped towards our free will, meaning the outcomes in our lives are largely controlled by our free will, but it is subjected to an overarching control by destiny. What does this mean? Okay, this means that we need to set goals and we need to pursue these goals by acting or taking action in a routine manner until these routines becomes habit, and these habits become a system, and the system becomes a part of our identity at the character level. What do I mean by character? Essentially, our character is defined by our values, right? So the more aligned these values are to the universal principles of life, which is God's call, if you will, or God's rules, if you will, but I prefer to call them universal principles of nature. So the more aligned our values are to these universal principles of nature, the bigger our rate of success with the goals that we set throughout our lives. So how much destiny, how much free will really depends on the person you are. And this brings us to the third question. Yeah, we started with destiny or free will, and I debunked the notion that life is entirely controlled by destiny by demonstrating to you that we are creatures of free will, but to what extent we are in control of the events in our lives really depends on how aligned our character is to the universal principles. So the more aligned your character, so your character makeup is essentially defined by your value. So how aligned are your personal values or your character values to these universal principles gives you greater power, meaning you become a human being of a stronger free will. And as you move closer and closer to having 100% alignment, well, I don't know anybody who has 100% alignment. I wouldn't know what is 100% alignment because I'm human. But life is well worth lived in pursuit of this alignment, meaning your personal values are as closely aligned as possible to the universal principles of nature. As you know, in previous videos, we have already identified and discussed 3 universal principles of nature. One of it is the law of attraction. The second one is the law of free will. Who can remember the third one? Please comment in the comment section if you want to find the answer to this. You can go and view that previous videos. Here's a hint. The answer to this third universal principle that we have discussed is in a video about habits. Go take a look, and if you could find it, if you could find all the 3, yeah, mentioned 2, and the third one, if you can find the third one in that video, please type in the comment section. Yeah, so this essentially what life is all about. So rather than asking destiny or free will, ask the more powerful question, which is how much destiny and how much free will, and how do we gear and set in motion towards a life that is almost 100% free will. When you're living a life that is close to 100% free will, then life becomes a magical journey that's serendipity after serendipity. Yeah, it is true, it is possible. Yeah, I've seen the lives of people unfolding like this. To a certain extent, I think I am living that life, and life is great. I am not the wealthiest woman on earth, well, far from it, but my life is beautiful, it is magical, and it is full of serendipitous events, right? So, essentially, my message to you is set goals periodically, minimally at the start of every new year, and do review and revise these goals. Goal setting is so important, and in order to achieve your goals, you have to improve in life. You have to keep learning, you have to keep growing, and essentially this growth is directed towards becoming completely aligned to the universal principles of nature. And as I had also explained to you, we don't have any literature that definitively and exhaustively lists the universal nature. That's for us to discover in our life. There are some books that throw some light on this matter, the contents of which I will share in future videos. So I hope this video has been insightful. So life is not entirely controlled by destiny or God's will or God's plan, but there is an element of God and uncertainty and randomness in everything that happens in your life. But you are the co-creator of your life. Start taking charge of your life. Start moving towards living a life where more and more of your goals that you set are transforming into outcomes for you. And if you like this video, please subscribe, and there are more coming your way every week.